You're listening to the Enlight Life podcast, hosted by Alexandra Cousins. In this podcast, we're going to really demystify disease and the polarization around all things health, so you can heal yourself and thrive for real.
So welcome everyone to the Enlight Life podcast. I am your host, Alexandra Cousins. And this is really the intro video to sort of introduce myself, introduce the Enlight Life podcast. Why am I doing this? And who am I to be doing a podcast on all things health and really how our health issues relate to our life issues, and how so much of health has been complicated and convoluted, and how to find our way out of the crazy maze as a regular person, right? So here we go. This is my story. So ever since I can remember, really as a 4 or 5-year-old child, I was just absolutely mesmerized, obsessed with all things health. And so much so that I would sneak into my parents' formal lounge where I wasn't really allowed in, and I would go and look at the health encyclopedia books. And of course, back then there was these big encyclopedias, with all the graphic images, and I would spend as much as I could looking at these books, and I would just be mesmerized. And clearly I had my own thoughts and ideas already then around that. And then kind of fast forward as I got older, I was always mesmerized when people were reporting, being ill, having a disease, getting cancer, whatever it was, right? Especially back then in the early 80s. Cancer was like really the big thing. And I just remember, our family often talking about it and like, oh, so-and-so has cancer and this is happening, or, so-and-so is dying of whatever. I think mainly it was really back then cancer was the big thing. And already then I thought, wow, they have an opportunity to redo life all over again in a magical way. And these were my thoughts. And so whenever someone was sick and they were kind of, in our immediate circle, I would give away one of my little Smurfs, or what were those other puppets called with those flamey hairs? I forget the name now. Anyway, these tiny little figurines. I had lots of different ones. And to me, they represented the magical world. And I would say to my mom, can you give so-and-so this little figurine, the Smurf or the gnome, and just tell them to tell this little dwarf, gnome, magical being all their issues, and that, they can heal. And I'm sharing the story because in many ways, what I do today, what I've been doing for the last 10 years is in some ways, it really, I can see now how it comes out of those early days. And so anyway, fast forward in my early 20s, I started to have my own health issues, health crisis, sort of really starting with mental, emotional breakdowns, fairly severe, and eating disorders, also quite severe. That really started when I was 11 years old. And, in my early 20s, I started to put a few things together, and I go, well, something is not adding up. And of course, the diagnosis that I was given didn't sit well with me. And that is what kind of set me off on a journey that back then I still didn't know that I was on a journey, right? Back then I was like, I just want to live my normal life, whatever that meant. And I want to, resolve my health issues and kind of go back to my old life. Well, the old life was the life that was making me sick. And so Off I went to India. I learned a lot about Ayurveda. I went to an Ayurvedic yoga university, and I did two big courses there, and then just traveled to India. And within my time, my 2 stays of 3 months in India, my whole understanding of health really was revolutionized back then. I was living in Italy on the border of Switzerland, where we had access to the so-called best healthcare in the world. And that healthcare, with all the money that it was costing, it wasn't getting me absolutely anywhere. Whereas in India, having paid, I don't know what it was at the time, but something ridiculous like $200 for my 1 month stay at this yogic university, I had learned so much more, received so much more care on all levels. And I was being listened to, and I was being worked with at a whole new level. So that definitely set me up on a trajectory for life. And yes, initially my health issues were resolved on a superficial level. Not everything, because I kept my eating disorder. I kept a lot of my stressors, but sort of on a superficial level, a lot of things were resolved. And then fast forward in my mid-30s, after I had my 2 children, again, I started to feel quite a strong decline in my health, and to the point where I was wondering, am I dealing with autoimmune conditions? Am I afflicted with some kind of weird disease that nobody has discovered yet? Because I was feeling so utterly depleted, fatigued. There was just no energy, no life force in me. And yet, as we do, we start going to functional medicine practitioners and, of course, adjusting my diet, doing all the kind of quote right things on a superficial level. And doctors found nothing wrong with me. And, it was just due to, pregnancy and, those kind of things, and kind of like, quote, getting on with age, right? By then I was 35, 36. And I just carried on. I carried on with some adaptogens, with, some functional medicine supplements, I did switch my diet to what I now call the romantic, sort of the romantic organic diet, right? We ate everything we were living in South Africa at the time, and all of our foods was coming from beautiful, bio farms. Everything was, raw milk, raw cheese, churned butter. The meats were all organic, and definitely some of the best quality in the world, I would say. Once again, we were never really into packaged foods or processed foods or any of that kind of stuff. So overall, I thought I was living a really good lifestyle. And then again, fast forward in my 40s, or actually just before my 40th birthday, I realized, okay, I'm done here. My body's collapsing. I had absolutely no life force. And I literally once again felt like, okay, something must be really fundamentally, majorly wrong with me. I must be heading towards a complete health crisis, because that's how I felt. I had no energy to play with my kids. I had no energy to get up in the morning. And it just then very quickly became so severe, to the point where, other than doing the strict necessary, I was in bed. I wasn't functioning. I was kind of crawling from bed to couch. And that just got progressively worse. And of course, then my mental health also started to suffer. And very quickly, things just got to a point where I just wasn't coping. And because I wasn't getting any answers from the doctors, that's the point where my husband, being an astrologer, I asked him, well, what should I do now? Like, what do the stars say? What is happening to me? And in many ways, I was at wit's end, because by then, obviously, I hadn't felt good in my body for a very long time. And, I was doing the classical dance of, a little bit up, a little bit down, a little bit up, a little bit down, have more coffee, have more protein, all those usual things, exercise more, and then, crash some more. So I really wasn't getting anywhere. And at the same time, I was, if you will, approaching not quite middle age, but, I think in your 40s, you do start to question a lot of things. And so it all kind of came together at the same time. Little kids, not great health, not really knowing where I was going with my life. It felt like, well, if I continue with all the things that are happening, my life is just going to become more and more miserable. So I knew some big intervention had to happen. And so I withdrew from my kind of high-powered career. At the time, it was kind of like a brief stint, a brief but powerful stint in fashion. Prior to that, I had always been in concept development for health spas. And I decided, okay, it's time to stop everything and to really overhaul my life in a major way. And that's exactly what I did. And the first thing that sort of fell in my lap was fasting. And I dove deep into a 40-day fast. So, when I say I went deep, I did really go deep quite quickly, where all I was consuming was for 6 hours a day, grape juice with lemon and a ton of herbs. And I was doing a ton of enemas. And other than that, for 18 hours a day, I was dry fasting. And I did do it for 40 days. And that really began to shift everything for me. And because the shifts were so dramatic and powerful on all levels, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, I really started to question more than ever before the medical system. And I was angry. I was angry at the fact that even though I was spending up until that point a ton of money with doctors, functional medicine practitioners, buying supplements from all corners of the world, all kinds of sophisticated things, and having a reasonably good diet or for kind of conventional minds and thought ways of thinking, my diet was pretty darn good. And yet I was living such a poor life on all levels. And I wasn't getting help. And so I was angry. I was angry because I was like, how is it possible? Here's someone who's successful, who is willing to spend money, who's gone to a gazillion people, who's bought all the things, who is doing a good diet, who is exercising. And I'm living really in the pits of hell at the end of the day. I was like, if this is what life has in store for me, I don't even want to be here, And yes, of course, we want to be there for our children. But I got to the point where that wasn't even enough. It wasn't enough to pull me out of bed. It was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. And so the fasting really is what started to radically shift things. And then I went into a kind of really predominantly raw food lifestyle for about 5 years, very high fruit. I would say 70 to 80, 90% fruit, tons of fasting in between, tons of enemas, detoxing, etc. And I had never felt that good in my life ever, just on all levels. The spiritual insights, the physical healing that was happening, the energy that I had. I just genuinely had never, ever experienced that. And so I started sharing. My story and what I was doing. And of course, I was, also just learning more and more. I had mentors and I was doing courses. And so, yes, very quickly, I started sharing and helping others also on their healing journey. It began with sharing, and then very quickly, people started saying, well, can you help me? Can you help me? And I was like, okay, well, I'm not doing anything else right now, so why not? And long story short, once again, right, is that even though the raw foods were incredible and I was having amazing results, at some point, again, I hit not a major wall, but some walls where I realized, okay, there's still something missing. And I hit several walls, again, not major ones. And yes, the raw food lifestyle, the fasting, the detoxing did incredible things for me. And I will never go back and say that that was wrong, because it absolutely wasn't. But whilst for a few years, I thought, okay, everybody, the whole world should be raw, the whole world should be high fruit, and this is the lifestyle. I began seeing, the pitfalls. And I want to be very clear. It's not that I now believe no one can be raw, fully raw, and that, raw food or fruit is wrong or bad. Absolutely not. I still fully believe in the power of raw food. I believe in the power of fruit and detoxing on fruit. It's just that I then learned to fill the gaps and to basically continuously, and I'm still continuously refining my process of understanding how do we go from healing and regenerating to then living a life that can be lived, right, that is sustainable. And what does it mean to thrive continuously? And ultimately, by again continuing in, educating myself, doing courses, getting mentors, opening up my horizons beyond raw foods, veganism, even though I am still 95%, probably more, but just to give a number, I'm still 95% plant-based. And I still believe, for me personally, that is what works best for many different reasons, right? It works best for my body. It works best for my energetics, for my ideology. And at the same time, it got to the point where I had to break free from all boxes, from all ideologies, from all dogmatic ways of thinking, and sort of find deeper universal truths. And all along the way, I continued to applying all my learnings to the clients that I was seeing. And in many ways, my business just continued to grow and blossom. And I do believe that a big reason why it's been continuously growing is because I haven't stopped growing myself. I haven't stopped seeking out new knowledge and putting, new knowledge together, and really becoming completely undogmatic. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Of course, I'm now leaving out a lot of important points, such as ultimately I found the importance of enzymes and taking the correct enzymes, just as I found the importance of taking correct herbs in correct dosages and really making sure that the quality is the best that you can get your hands on. I found out about peptides, peptide bioregulators, and how amazing they can be, and also where the pitfalls are with all of these kind of supplements, right? So ultimately, what I'm sharing, what I will be sharing in this podcast series is, I want to go into all the topics, such as we need to break through the idea that there is one perfect diet out there for everyone. And I'm going to go into the depths of why that is. How do we find the perfect diet for us? And that there is no such thing as a perfect diet, or even for that matter, a perfect lifestyle, that once we live it, we never have to engage with our health and our body and emotions ever again, right? There isn't a recipe for, okay, just do these 25 things, take these 20 supplements, and you'll be in the best health possible. No, there is no such thing. The reality is that our health issues are intimately connected to our life issues, intimately connected to unresolved trauma, unresolved lineage issues. And so if we want to live in the best health possible, at some point we need to address those, right? And that's one thing. We also need to realize that we all live in a very in an unprecedented and increasingly toxic soup. The levels of toxicity that all of us are exposed to are unprecedented. And so, and it's not like just because we detox once, we have a, heavy metal detox once, or we detox of parasites or whatever once, we'll never have to do it again. No, the lifestyle that is forced upon us by the reality that we all share in this day and age is such that we continuously, in a very relaxed manner, right? But we continuously are going to have to apply ourselves towards our health. And just as also, going to the gym, it's not like we get fit once for, the summer or whatever it is, and we get in the best shape of our lives, and then we kind of drop it and we go, well, I'm now there, I never have to do anything again, right? No, it's a journey of a lifetime. It's a journey of 10,000 steps, as one of my mentors likes to say. And so what I bring with this podcast, my intention is to really open your eyes as to what are all the things that we need to focus on, that we need to understand in order to really live a life of thriving. And that there's a lot of components, and at the same time, we don't need to be overwhelmed. But as long as we put one foot in front of the other and we begin working on our foundations, because what I see today is, with the world of biohacking and health optimization, so many are so focused on optimizing and becoming these perfect, so-called perfect versions, that we're missing the foundations. And that's not going to serve anyone, because then we have a lot of people that may look the part, but ultimately on a deeper level are still not living a life of ease, not living a life of true integrated health. So my goal for this podcast, just as the goal that I have for the academy that I have created, the Enlight Life Academy for Regenerative Health, is to really teach people the foundations and undogmatic ways of looking at health and how to regain our health. And I also want to say here, I'm not a perfectionist. And I'm not striving anymore towards some kind of unreal perfection. I have a lot of issues that I've resolved, a ton of issues that I've resolved on a deep foundational level. I know myself, I know my weaknesses. And that allows me to be a lot more gentle with myself and to go, you know what? Yes, you may never be this, quote, perfect version of yourself, right? Because also, like, what does that mean? But the level of health that I have achieved, and the level of knowledge and understanding, and the level of compassion, and the level of self-connection and self-love, wow, that is enough for me. And I know that if I continue living my life with this level of awareness, whilst also regularly from time to time doing detoxing, whilst regularly, of course, working at my physical health, working on mobility, working on strength training. So in other words, doing all the foundational pieces, yes, I'm going to continue to thrive and I'm going to continue to improve. And that is the message that I have for everyone, that it's not about perfection, because in my mind, perfection doesn't really exist, right? We're just here to continuously evolve and work with what arises, with the truth that arises out of our body. And then we all have genetic weaknesses, but they are not here to stop us in any ways. They are just here to tell a story and to guide us, because our weaknesses can become our strength. And yeah, that's really it. So I hope that this introduction, entices you to follow me and to listen to a lot of the podcasts. We're going to have some interesting guests, of course. And maybe the other thing to add is that which is an important piece, in the 10 years that I've worked with all kinds of people, all kinds of health issues, many of them, probably the majority of people that I've worked with, were people that have done the famous everything. There were people that have exhausted all their avenues of the medical system, functional medicine, and they were getting absolutely nowhere other than worse, often with severe chronic or even acute conditions. And I was able to help them. And I always like to say it's not because I have some, superhuman capacity. I just always, with those people, I went back to the basics. And the basics are we need to look at our emotional health. And oftentimes that is the crux of the matter. And in so many cases that I have helped resolve and improve radically, it's because the deep emotional contractions, wounds, traumas were unseen, unacknowledged, and unresolved. And so a lot of the work is there. Another big piece is, detox and biohacking, all these practices, they're thrown around everywhere, right? I mean, detox is almost a word we no longer want to hear. However, in my experience, a lot of the detoxes out there either don't go deep enough, and that's a big issue, because you can do detoxing, but if you're only skimming the surface and you're not getting to the deeper issues, the deeper tissues of the body, well, you've just wasted time, effort, money, products, and you're still not going to get anywhere. So a big problem that I see with detoxing is that most people do not go deep enough. And certainly in functional medicine, we don't go deep enough. We skim the surface, which of course, skimming the surface is going to give you some results for some time, but ultimately you're going to find yourself running around in circles. Why? Because you haven't gone deep enough. So the concept of going deep enough is really, really important. Another problem with detoxing is that it is not often not done in the correct sequence. There's a sequence to detoxing. And depending on your issue, it's going to take time to get to these deeper layers, right? It's again like anything. We're not going to go and create a beautiful, sinewy, slender, lean, wiry body from, being heavy with lymphatic stagnation, etc. Like that's not going to happen over the course of 3 months, 6 months, not even a year. We can achieve those results, but they're going to take 3, 4, 5 years to get there, right? And so similarly, when we are dealing with chronic health conditions, a lot of us, myself included, right, by the time I was 40, I was dealing with 20 years and more of unaddressed health conditions. It took several years to resolve that. And I had to address layer by layer systematically with patience. There's some shortcuts, of course, that we can take, but ultimately we still need to address things systematically. And when that is not done, we're going to simply find our health issues at a later stage again and again. And we're going to go round and round in circles, and we're going to wonder, why am I still not healing? And then we can go and blame it on Lyme and other pathogens, EVB, and whatever it is. We're gonna find new things to blame it on, when the reality is we haven't really addressed things on a foundational level. And another issue that I have with this whole world of detoxing and functional medicine is that oftentimes we miss the importance of regenerating the body, again, on a foundational level. Because if we are living with chronic health conditions, you can be sure that there are nutritional deficiencies. And if those aren't addressed on a deep enough level, we are again going to encounter health issues over and over. And then, of course, another problem that I have with a lot of what functional medicine, and never mind allopathic medicine, does is that it doesn't address the regeneration of the neuroendocrine and sort of the rest of the endocrine system. So when our endocrine system is weakened due to years and years of stress, chronic degeneration, chronic health issues, nutritional deficiencies, and, may I point out over and over again, stress, because stress is the most misunderstood element still that influences our health. And many of us, we kind of listen to how stress deeply impacts our health, and we think, well, I'm handling my stress, I cope well. But I would say if you're one of those people, as I was, that think that, you are a quote good coper, chances are you're fooling yourself, because ultimately our body, yes, positive stressors are great, but if we are continuously dealing and coping with negative stressors, the body is going to suffer. And it's going to suffer on a multitude of levels. And that is going to absolutely affect your health. So, addressing the stressors, regenerating everything that stress has kind of eaten away at is super important. And that is, once again, something that takes time. And a last point that I would like to make is that really on a physical level, so never mind the psycho-emotional, psycho-spiritual level and, the inner chemistry level, but on a physical structural level, we then also do need to address fascia and, once again, the stressors held by the fascia, as well as structural impairments that have occurred either due to poor genetics, things like wearing restrictive shoes, and or doing exercise without first correcting these functional weaknesses. Because when we exercise, especially when we exercise heavily with a body whose structural weaknesses haven't been addressed, what are we doing? We are only going to be reinforcing those weaknesses. Yes, we may build muscle, and yes, we may find ourselves looking better, but unless we actually address those foundational weaknesses, we're only going to be creating a body that is reinforcing those coping mechanisms in the body. So in other words, when what I teach in the academy and what I teach to my clients in my various programs is we need to address all of the things that are stressing you. And as much as that can seem overwhelming, it doesn't have to be, because when we do so systematically at what I like to call the pace of love, we are going to have far better results in a short amount of time than with anything else. And I would say I've been proving this to myself and to my clients for the last 10 years. And that's what we do. So stick around for a lot of really interesting information. And I like to say I'm here to demystify disease and to take away your fear, your misconception, your dogmas around anything that you might be holding true, so that you can actually truly resolve your various health issues and come to live a truly beautiful, balanced life in a body that feels good all the time. And, I've only experienced that really, I'm now 50. And only in the last 5-6 years can I genuinely say that I've experienced this for the first time in my life. And now I kind of understand why people want to continue living well into old age, right? Because if this is what living means, wow, I want to stay around. But for most of my life, I was like, why do we want to stay in a body when being in a body feels so terrible? And so it doesn't have to be that way in the least. And we can all do a lot of things at a pace that feels good and come out the other side completely renewed beyond your wildest imagination. So I look forward to this journey with you, and thank you to all those of you listening. Sending you all my love.